Oh, I thought you were really there, Quentin.
This is new. I can finally use a virtual background on my computer.
Yeah.
What did you do to change
How did you get the power?
For whatever reason, on a Windows laptop, they didn't have that feature until the newest update.
Oh, so maybe I could do it now as well.
And I had to download a special thing I got to the virtual background settings page.
Okay.
That part wasn't installed by default.
Because for me, this is what happens right now. If I put on my virtual background, I become the background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what was going on for me too.
Okay, so maybe I'll check the update and then tomorrow.
I don't know, Maeve. It's kind of cool. You look like you're, you know, fighting in the jungle.
I am actually outside right now, but I'm excited I can hide our messy attic.
Yes. Well, this is the playroom, so yeah.
Oh yeah, actually where you are, I was like, that's not a playroom. I swear to God, this is my first time probably using Zoom with like people using virtual backgrounds on this project. So the whole time I thought David was like a diehard fan and had built himself that room. And like only after like something happened and you were like showing us how it makes you invisible or whatever, I was like, oh, that's not real. Cool. So
it's a particularly good thing to do for company culture and especially for classroom culture, so people don't feel bad about sharing their spaces.
Right.
So
Exactly.
So I'm trying to justify my fun background by saying there's a pedagogical purpose and that you should all adopt it as well. But by doing this, it makes it clear to other people. You know.
One is privacy, obviously, because there's so much that you give away in your background, and especially because these are recorded. You know, it's just it is.
Everyone's just now thinking like, wait a second, what am I showing?
We're really worried about once the courts start switching to Zoom hearings, which they're saying they're going to, about how that's going to be showing like our clients' houses, who a lot of them are living in poverty, and like maybe, you know, the judge is going to be noticing
things,
details that they may not want.
Kate, that's a really good point. But the BBA is putting out. I mean, obviously we can't reach everybody and give everybody information, but the BBA is putting out, they're writing little pamphlets or whatever, handouts for directions for remote hearing. And I'm working
Abby is Abby working on that too?
Abby and Sarah Lee at VLP. And I just edited, they're starting with, I can't remember. Anyway, I'm meeting with Sarah and maybe Abby tomorrow morning. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, that's something I know we've talked about with Abby, like on our unit calls, was like, we want to encourage litigants to whenever possible use a background, but then we were trying to weigh that against like sometimes the backgrounds look funny, like.
Well, we could, you know, I mean, the thing is we could just pick one for them, you know, just say, when you start Zoom, do this. I mean, one of the things it looks like is it looks like right now that most of the calls are going to be over the telephone unless you have a lawyer. But I do think that's a really good, I mean, this is a perfect timing for me because I'm meeting with with Sarah tomorrow morning, who's working with Abby on this.
Okay.
So
I'm just gonna.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Okay. I also have thoughts on this as well, which I'll maybe drop to you in the Slack, just from things that I've heard from people who are teachers dealing with low income households. Because the other thing is not just seeing things; it's also hearing things. Okay. So to officially start our stand-up, we've got everybody here, I think, and I'm just aware of everyone's time. We're missing a couple of people who I think might be scared that they're going to get called on. I don't know why, right? But we know that it's going to be Sinead and Finola, who we spent a lot of time on the call with today, going through programming a docx based on kind of Quentin's lesson yesterday. So that's going to be who's going to tell us who learned something and what they learned, right? If you guys, I mean, we covered a lot, so you can just pick something simple. And then we're going to go into kind of how everyone else is doing, if there's any blockers. And then what's next, Michelle, remind me?
Then we're going to, I mean, we're just going to decide when those items are going to be, you know, when and how those items will be dealt with. And I think
and then make sure that everyone has an actionable task.
Yeah.
right? And then maybe just get an update on the 209A, because I'm kind of feeling a bit lost as to where we are in that. And then if possible, an update on the TRO in terms of like signing and if we have a court to test it with yet.
And I think there was a form that Quentin might have wanted to bring up at some point. I don't know if it's now or later, but
I think Quentin might want to talk about.
Order-wise, we could do it at
the end.
At the end,
Okay.
I think, probably, with the other items.
So while everyone's still fresh, Sinead and Finola, I'm going to turn over to you guys, and you guys can tell us a little bit about what you learned. I mean, it was a very lengthy call, but it's quite important. I mean, the stuff that we covered, I feel a lot more confident working in DocX now. So hopefully you might be able to share one or two things that you learned with the rest of the team.
Will I go? Okay, I'll go first, Sinead. So yeah, we were working with DocX today, and obviously like all the coding is so new. So I reached out to Maeve and looked for a little bit of help, and then Michelle kindly got on the call and helped us out. But yeah, so we were first of all kind of going through the differences between uploading kind of with PDF and with the DocX. And what I've learned, I'm conscious that a lot of things I learned, a lot of people probably already know, but
we're very unfamiliar with DocX, so don't be scared.
So on the playground, the first thing I noticed when we first went to do it, to upload the DocX, we went straight to the upload kind of tab bar at the top, and then we realized you have to upload as template, so we did that. And then when we were going through it, there was a few problems with variables. There was one variable we were trying to use for plaintiff, so we didn't know whether the plaintiff or petitioner. So we were trying to figure out like how to get both up, or what way to go about that. And Michelle let us know that we always have to use plurals the majority of the time. And then when we figured that out in the end, we had to use, I think I have it written down here, it was other parties in the end. And then we figured out the index. So like square bracket 0 was the first party, and then square bracket 1 is the second party.
Are you just taking all of them? Is Sinead not going to be able to say it?
It was a lot. We went through a lot.
We did go through a lot.
Sinead, if you want to continue, I think there was more.
I think Finola kind of hit a lot of them because they were kind of my 2 points. But one thing that we that has been addressed now, I saw in the assembly line channel or the code channel, was using the checkbox. So for one part of our kind of form, it has a checkbox for the court, and then literally right beside that you have a description, and then beside that you have a date. So right now myself and Finola are trying to figure out what is the best way to address that, whether it's doing everything individually, and if you click yes to the checkbox, do you continue to fill out the form, and if you click no, do you go onto the next checkbox? But it seems like you'll be creating an individual question for every checkbox rather than, I don't know, checking.
So that's something that I would term as like a question, and something that maybe we'd have to dig into, and we might assign people on this call to look into that, because it's something that is really fascinating. I think a lot of people will benefit from it. So if we assign someone to that and you get an answer, maybe just write it down and put it in the code channel. We're, as I said, using the magnifying glass. We're using the magnifying glass. To show what we've learned. And it's maybe easier if we show like together with the code and with the PDF or the DocX that we're talking about. Like for example, I understand what Sinead and Finola are talking about because I spent time looking at the documents with them. But for people who don't necessarily have that background, I'm thinking it might be a good idea to like share those documents, right, Michelle?
Yeah, that sounds great. And you can share code snippets if you all know how to do that on Slack, so that it doesn't take up a lot of space.
Yeah,
you could just put the code right in there, or you could share the actual documents.
Telling people how to access the icons too might. So that sounds like 2 new things to put in a Slack video, maybe.
Okay.
How to add the magnifying glass. I'm sure most people don't know how to do that.
Sure. Right, how to add the magnifying glass, and how to maybe do like quote indentation and code blocks and code. Okay, so those are 3 things that I'll nudge to do.
I just wanted to clarify one thing really quickly. is that the plurals are when you're using the built-ins that we created with the basic questions.yaml. So you don't always have to use plurals for everything in code, just specifically the way we've constructed the built-ins usually uses plural values right now.
And you're talking about that, and where you find that is in the internal object names.md. That's your list,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I think Maeve, you shared that in the chat earlier for myself and Sinead, didn't you?
Yeah,
yeah.
Maybe we'll just put that in the actual code channel.
And Quentin did as well. He shared that in the code channel. Maybe we'll pin that item. That might be a useful item to pin.
Which is
Does that
item?
make sense?
The
internal objects, the built-in.
Oh, the list of
built-ins.
Yeah,
right?
and we could expand that. I think that's the best place to put things like small code snippets for working in docx.
I think
so
maybe
if we
that should
identify
be.
Those.
I mean, if we're going to do code snippets, I might put it in a different place than the built-ins, because those are two like very different concepts, and I don't really want to get those confused.
Maybe this is a conversation that we can talk about.
Yes, maybe we can have this.
It's going to get very technical.
Yeah.
Sure. And so I just wanted to say, like, I'm learning along with all of you guys, and it's so exciting. Like when we started getting the things right in the docx, it was, and things were populating and the questions were coming right. It was really, really exciting. So, and just a really big applause to Finola and Sinead for sticking with us for like, I don't know, it was like 4 hours. They were like, can I take you for 15 minutes? And I was like, sure. And it was really good. We made a lot of progress. So I think maybe, I know that, I think Jason, you're both, the other two teams are on PDFs, right? You guys aren't doing docx.
Yeah, we're
Quentin,
on PDFs.
You're muted, Quentin, if you're talking to us.
Sorry, we do have another team that's doing a docx, but I
think
don't
it's Mike and Tyler.
Okay. Yeah, we should check in with them probably.
Yeah, so maybe the stuff that we learned might be beneficial for them. And I think that if you guys are ever doing docx, then you know that Sinead and Finola are going to be the experts in this field. So you can ask them your questions. Okay, so that's the portion of what we learned. We've got like 20 minutes left. The next thing was to ask, if anyone had any blockers, what they are. And of course, if you wanted to just give us a little update, that's also fine. You can maybe do that. I'm not going to put anyone on the spot for this though. So if you don't have any blockers, I'm going to count to 10. It's hard to put your pinky down. Okay, that was very quick though, right? Okay.
Quick 10.
That was a quick 10. But no blockers. Everybody's progressing. I think maybe what we could do is have on Friday, we could have like a demonstration by another team of their code. I'm thinking that might be a good, Eleni. Hi. We could do a demonstration and see, maybe I'm thinking Finola and Sinead, just because of the fact that they did it on a docx, and, it could be quite interesting to see how that form went. Another aspect that's interesting of that form is that it's only going to be completed by an attorney, which is quite different to some of the other forms that everyone else could have different users completing it. So maybe we could talk about doing that. Okay, the next thing that we wanted to talk about after blockers was action points. Does everybody feel like they have something to do getting off this call? They're not spinning their wheels. I'm going to take, if you don't say anything, Vincent, Jack, and Mia, I'm going to just take that as a yes. Okay. Right, so everyone's got an action point. The next thing is where we are with I'm going to start with the housing TRO. The things that I've outlined that are important to...
So is this the part where students are free to go work, or...
Yeah, I don't think this is...
Quick updates might actually be interesting to
I mean, they can stay. I'm just saying if they are not required, if they do have
if you do have to jump off, you're more than welcome, but it will be a max of 15 minutes that we're going to spend talking about what's outstanding. So it might give you an indication of what is happening in the project and just terms that you're going to get familiar with. So if you want to stay around, you can. If you don't, this is your time to jump off.
Can I jump in and say something before, if people were going to jump off? I'm thinking, we were talking about yesterday is adding question IDs for the questions, how that's good practice. And I would like to put in you know, a vote or something, so that when people are doing interviews that are not just for lawyers, they try to follow some basic readability rules, and we could put it in some of those we can put in the assembly line UX, but I don't think people are going to be checking 500,000 channels every time they do something. So I think if we had some basic rules, like try to never use parentheses. Every time you ask a question, if the question is on a court form, break it, evaluate it and see, is it actually one question, or is it a compound question where it's asking you 17 different things, or even 2 different things, and use those as a guideline, so you're not just asking the same questions that are on the form, but you actually think about it. And I mean, I don't want to throw a whole lot of stuff out, but I'm sort of thinking if we can, as people are working on learning DocAssemble and doing all this tech stuff, that they could also learn some basic readability principles as well.
Caroline. I really like that, Caroline, as a Teaching Tuesday, if you have some capacity. It doesn't even have to be a whole hour like we've done the other ones, if you don't have time to do an hour. But it could,
I like that a lot as well.
An hour, as you know.
Could be more than an hour.
Well, yeah, what do you think, Caroline? And I also had started a stub on the same page where I have my class materials, which for usability article. If you're interested, my goal was to have different people contribute that.
And this also goes back to our discussion of a style guide.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, it does. You're right.
Well, a code style guide is also, I mean, which style?
Well,
guide?
yeah, we had a
natural,
originally we were talking about a natural language text style guide,
language,
but yes,
right.
We have subsequently talked about code style too, but yes. So this might be, I like the idea of the Teaching Tuesday, and we can capture that information. And maybe that lives on Quentin's thing, and then also in our style guide, or maybe they become one document.
Which we'll move to Suffolk Lit Lab as soon as I have time to do that. So it won't be not my thing. It's the Suffolk Lit Lab thing right now.
But it's also something that will benefit.
Have lots of contributors.
It will benefit everybody in just writing generally. Plain language is a very beneficial thing to have, and I think, you know, I spent 4 years of law school trying to write like a lawyer, and then every year after that trying to unlearn that, like.
Yes.
No Latin.
It's harder to unlearn than to, So, I mean, I just, you know, how adamant I am about this, but I just keep thinking if at every stand-up, we just dropped one thing, don't use parentheses today.
Well,
tomorrow, don't use all caps.
I like the idea of a Teaching Tuesday, because then we can capture it as a video.
I'm not doing it instead. I'm just saying these are things to keep in mind.
Caroline's tip of the day.
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, I like it.
So today's one is don't use
the other thing is, you know, when you talk about blockers, is this question is impossible to ask in a clear way. Bring it to the stand-up. What's a good way? And I think it's helpful for everybody to think about, you know, this question's asking 15 different things.
Yeah, and we had a lot of points like that on the 209A, I would say, right, where we had 3 or 4 people in a call to figure out how to ask a question and break it up. And if you just wrote it the way it said on the form, it would be impossible for anyone to ever answer it.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that if we can hijack one of the Teaching Tuesdays for that, that will be really beneficial. And as I said, it'll help you outside of this as well, because plain language is extremely beneficial when communicating with people. Okay, I'm just writing that down as well. So we're at that point now where students can jump off if this is something that's that's just gonna go over your head, but you're more than welcome to stay on. We're basically gonna do an update. Sorry.
And you can feel free just to sit and marinate in the confusion, as long as that's something that you're happy with, right? Like we want you to become familiar with these things.
Yeah.
And none of I mean, we haven't made this explicit, but I don't think, aside from we have one channel where we talk about things that are vaguely political, and so it's private. Well, two channels that are private. But
I was like, now that one? I don't know. What political chats?
There are 2 vaguely political, just so that people can speak freely. But for the most part, I'll be recording all these things, so you could watch it later. You can just as well sit in here, and then you can contribute if you're here. So.
Okay,
turn on or off your video accordingly.
So, and I also say you could ask questions if you are just curious to learn about it.
Yeah.
We won't.
And I think maybe I'll just
for people to ask
refresh what we're talking about when we're saying the housing TRO is the simple pilot project form where it's a 2-page form that's a relatively simple form that we've used to test out and develop our processes. The 209A, when we say that, we're referring to the restraining order, abuse prevention order, I think is the correct term I was saying, yeah. And that comprises of a number of different forms. At the moment, we've taken 7 forms to put together, and it's very, very complicated. But it's very urgent at the same time. So that's why when we're talking about those two different things, the housing TRO is pretty much ready to launch. The 209A still needs a little bit of work. So I think the first thing to talk about is the housing TRO. And the things that I've identified that are still outstanding prior to launch are the signing of the MOU, the testing of the signature flow. I mean, that's not a blocker. We can launch it without that, but it's something.
No, the testing of the signature flow is a blocker. We have to test it before. The testing of going from your computer to your phone and back, I think. Is that not a blocker?
Yeah. No, that's right. I misinterpreted what signature flow was. Yeah. Okay, so that is it. That we need to test that before. And then the last thing is actually, I think, finding a court that we're going to work with. Is that something that have we identified a court that we can work with?
I'm sorry, I got drawn away by emails relating to, I think, are we still talking TRO?
Yes.
We are, yes. So
yeah, so
hey, you can do the announcement if you want, David. I just forwarded
we have one more person to say that they got it, but we're just about ready to go with the TRO. So the court has looked at it. They like our cover sheet. They're able to receive it in the court that we tested with. We're just waiting for one more person to confirm receipt. And then once we have the MOU signed, we'll be able to start using that.
And then we can have a launch party, guys.
Awesome. Yeah. Pizza party. Separate pizza parties.
We are waiting on the MOU though, which is now out for signatures, which is an indeterminate amount of time how long that will happen. I believe there are 4 people that have to sign it. Some of them can sign electronically. Some of them are insisting on wet signatures.
And to be clear, this is a ministerial task we're waiting for right now. We're not waiting for any decisions to be made by anybody. They have to sign it, and they've agreed to sign it, and they just have to literally put the signature on the form.
So that's a really awesome milestone for us. When we get that up, we'll have something, and you guys can show your friends and family and stuff that this is something that you're working on, and this is what you can share that link around and show people. It's basically what my family talked about at dinner. So
can I ask a question about the signatures?
Jody.
Is there anybody driving that? Like, who's the person that's like saying, hey, we still need your signature? Like,
that's me.
Okay, cool.
Basically anything that takes place sort of out of these group meetings pretty much falls on me as far as the liaison with the courts and the rest of the university.
Thanks.
So the TRO court is a district court then?
It's can we say who the court is?
Can we say?
It's the Eastern Housing Court.
Oh, it's a housing court.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. That was who our test was. For the receipt of the form, the housing court department, the district court department, and BMC have all asked to be able to receive those forms.
So we can do more than one court? I mean, I know ultimately you want to do more than one court, but I thought Maeve was saying you have to identify the court that you're going to start off with.
We wanted to send some tests with the actual production code, and our hope was to do that with a real court that wouldn't mind getting the test.
Oh, so before it goes live, you need these agreements before it goes live. You need one court to test with.
Yep.
Yeah, so other courts, to be clear on the process, originally when we finished when we got close to what we thought was going to be the final product, we shared that with the courts. They then walked through the interview and approved the form. We have subsequently since changed the interview and given them the update with the new cover sheet. We also did a test just to make sure they could receive our emails. What we did today that was confirmed was that we did a full test through the form such that it was the actual form doing it and then spitting something out and emailing it to a real court. That real court has confirmed receipt. So we know that the thing we have at least is capable of sending a complete form through in the way that we will eventually send it once we are live.
So that's all so you're good to go then?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're just waiting on
one little test. One little test.
Oh, and this is different from the test that David just said. Oh, the test is the signature flow.
Yeah, we want to check what happens if you're completing it on a computer and you press it, you want to sign on your phone, and all the way around.
Yes, and I
did that on one thing this morning and it worked.
Yeah, and I have been doing that in my testing as well. So I did
perfect.
I did not.
So
I did not put it as
it's tested. It's informally tested, right? It hasn't been.
I've tested
it has not been
multiple
formally
times
tested,
actually, but I did not report it as an issue because it did not come up as an issue.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
But you also didn't fill out a test report, which tells us that a test has been passed. Yeah.
Yeah, I was not thinking.
It's informally tested.
I did it as part of my.
It was beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Feel free to. Everybody should feel free to informally test everything as much as possible. And then I mean, hopefully we'll get that information along the way. That sounds good.
Okay.
And this is also good for me to realize where I'm falling down on jumping the line on existing workflow.
I mean, feel free to jump if we can know about it. That would be useful to us, right?
Yes. Well, actually,
we don't like those vigilante testers.
Those vigilante testers, yeah.
That's right. This will lead well into the discussion Quentin and I actually specifically wanted to have at the end of the meeting today.
So
maybe we do 209A first, and then that.
Is there any way we can? I mean, if you guys need to jump off, I know this is supposed to be budgeted for half an hour, and you're more than welcome to jump off. Alternatively, we're just going to talk about the 209A quickly and where we're standing with that. I think it's going to, I'm not too sure who's actually even going to be speaking to that. Kate, Quentin, Caroline, David, not Kate. Okay.
I still need to share with Northeastern, which I forgot to do yesterday, so I'm going to do that today.
Okay.
I reached out to Safe Plan again and just to encourage them to use the link because I realized it might not have been clear that when we asked them for a review, in their comments that they could use it. So just say really please use it. Okay. Try to actually get that feedback.
And did you tell them about the new updates?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Hopefully they do, and a few other agencies have it. And I did in the email I had sent. I said, please give us your feedback when you use it. I haven't gotten feedback.
Okay.
So hopefully
the Northeastern folks, I mean, they were getting gung-ho about this. They really want to be using it. So hopefully they'll get us, like I said, our milestone is getting them to use it, produce forms, and then do a filing, and then see how it actually goes.
Okay, they just got the link they didn't get it Friday. Or did they get it Friday? Did you send it Friday or did you send it this week?
SafeLink has had the link for a while.
Safe
Plan, not link. Yeah, sorry. Safe Plan has had the link for a while. I just didn't know if it was clear to them that we were encouraging them to use it.
Right.
Because we had before, I think it had been framed as here's the link so far. Please give feedback. So this was that link we gave.
Go for it. Yeah.
Please use. I'm just Well, we'll see.
Cool.
So that's just the private beta that we're talking about now for people who didn't know all those words. A private beta is also a term that I'm realizing people might not know as well.
It's okay. I think if they have a question, they can ask just so we can move forward with the.
So we're on the private beta. Is there anything else? Is the flow changing or anything like that? I mean, what else are we waiting for in terms of the 209A?
We're gonna put in a screen in response to some of the feedback, so that on page 1 you can say you have children, but it doesn't necessarily trigger page 2, because if you don't want page 2 covered, if you don't want your children covered, there may be reasons not to list your children in the whole package. So we have to put in a piece there where you don't automatically go to children. And then we're also going to make some of the addresses that they ask for at the end in the plaintiff confidential form conditional, because you may not want those to show up anywhere, impounded or not. And then we also need to integrate this idea of the whole way that impoundment and confidentiality works together. It's not clear at all. And so we're working on the language.
I'm glad to hear that, because I was confused by it.
That was
one of my comments too.
Yeah. So I think there are necessary changes still being made to the flow, but it's generally narrow in response to specific feedback we're getting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's
Which
good
I think,
it's good for advocates, because advocates know what these things mean. So
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. These things
per se, not really.
Yeah, these things need to be fixed before it goes out into the wild. But until then, I think it's operational, isn't it? I mean, it's.
Yeah, there was one bug which I should really fix today, which I think Jody, thanks for catching, where there was a checkbox that was not checked.
Oh, you mentioned that, yeah.
So
that
may look at that
be
as an isolated fix.
Yeah, I think I know what that is, and we're also addressing that or complicating it further.
Oh, we are? Okay, this is about the types of abuse. Is that the same issue? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so maybe I should hold off on that then.
Yeah, or we could just,
or you
can look at my
do the first
my
fix
GitHub, look at my GitHub, my branch, and see if that fixes it. Yeah.
And there are going to be other bugs like that for us to go through, which that's just going to be a continual thing. But I think that's the one that I really feel like we need to fix right away.
Jody has something to say. Yeah?
I can keep going through and doing different variations. Do you want me to keep messing with that specifically?
I would say let's do it after Caroline gets her language changes merged, because those are probably going to be this week, right, Caroline?
Yeah. So also you tell us when that happens, and we can start, and we'll start talking to the testing team about how we can approach that when we don't have kind of a stable, like when it's going to remain a little unstable, and still create scenarios and checklists, and then test it a bit more exhaustively.
Mm-hmm. And Caroline, as you're doing stuff, if you need somebody to go in and jump in and test things, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to.
Maybe you should join the testing channel, and we can.
Jody should join it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'll do that right now.
Yeah.
So something that is quite an exciting thing that we're working on, and that I think everyone might actually end up looking at, is in order to test the interviews that you're running. If you're interested in learning about testing, we're at this point where we're automating the testing process somewhat. So it's still going to be manual, but there's code within the sheets that's going to automate a lot of the work. So it's going to be really cool. And I think that once we get to the stage where you guys have done your interviews and you actually want to test how they work, you can learn about that stage of the process. And by the time you get there, it's going to be good.
All right, we're gonna test out the automation process and make sure that it doesn't become something that needs to be tested. But we think that at least that there's a good chunk of it that can be eased for the testers and make that process more smooth.
And it's so exciting, guys. I can't tell you.
I think Maeve just loves coding, is what I think.
Yes.
I think that's what we're discovering, and it's a wonderful discovery.
Well, it's magical, isn't it? It's so magical when it works.
You're like a wizard, like a real wizard.
Incantation.
Yeah.
It's 7:02. It's 1:02. I'm very conscious of everyone's time, and I know that Quentin and David wanted to speak to a form or something. I'm not sure about, but I'm not sure if everybody needs to stay on the call for that again. Okay, bye, Finola.
No, it's not on everyone. Finola, it's late for you. Yeah, later.
Bye, Sinead. Okay, I'm not gonna say bye to everybody. Bye, guys.
Bye to the goodbye people.
To the goodbye people.
Quentin, no, are you saying bye?
I'm not saying goodbye myself.
He's waving goodbye to people.
Waving goodbye to people.
It's funny how Zoom turns you into a waiver.
It does.
Jody, I hope are you staying on? Good.
Jody's amazing, guys.
Yeah. So what we figured out was this form we did yesterday. It took like 3 or 4 hours to do. There's like really no branching, and it's really perfect for advocates. And we're thinking we'd like to make sure we can do those kind of things quickly and then have a parallel track of testing that doesn't prevent those from getting in the wild quickly. So the specific form is this one that we started doing in the Teaching Tuesday yesterday, which is the COVID housing motion to dismiss. That's gonna, I say, turn into a pumpkin in mid-August, because it's no longer gonna be able to be something someone can use. So it'd be great to say, hey, we can send this out to some advocates in the housing realm to start using now, because they can send it to their clients to sign and then help them file it.
We were gonna do that for clients, for anybody.
It can go to anybody. I will say, like, we won't necessarily hide it from people. But we should probably continue.
We're planning on linking to it in Mass Legal Help, a specific article. So I hope it's not just advocate specific.
So the question now is, what is that? We need to test it.
We can test it, and we can accelerate that a bit.
I think the question is if we're comfortable with having testing be a parallel phase to release, essentially, for this kind of form.
For a low bar MVP, low, low risk.
So you want to release it without testing?
Exactly.
You want to release it without testing, basically.
Right. And we could. And
I feel like not fighting people about this is what I feel like, because, like, I mean, if it's not dangerous, if it's not going to get people in trouble, I don't know how people feel about like making a reputation, and like how the community feels about, things if they error or don't fill out or make it more difficult. I don't know. I think there will be. It sounds like a simple form, and it sounds like the bugs, if there are any, will be minor. It's generally not. Like, there are some industries in which people just release stuff, and the quality assurance testing is user testing, right? It's testing in the wild. Games do that a lot. Now, they didn't used to. With an understanding that it is in beta and that people are being beta testers. It's not really, that's not a thing you have to do in general, is release stuff with unknown bugs, right?
This is something that Quentin and I actually were talking about, whether or not actually what the appropriate framing for the release of some of these would be, as to whether or not these actually would start with them as being beta releases. And actually, so this actually goes to Caroline's question about linking to it directly or putting it on our website. We originally were talking about having it be sort of as the 209A is, which is start with a private beta, so that there's no barrier to us releasing it directly to advocates right away. I think that was our original.
That was our original discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. Jody, sorry, I thought I saw you had a comment.
I was just going to ask a couple questions. So, what you're saying, Quentin, and wanting to do is that's a solution. And so what is the problem that you are trying to solve? Like, what's the reasoning behind wanting to do that?
Sure, yeah. So the reasoning is that this is a form that people can only use for 2 months, and we want them to be able to use it.
Meaning like 2 months, like these 2 months now?
The next 2 months. After that, it's irrelevant.
Okay.
And the secondary... Yeah, the urgency is right now people can't meet with their clients. So, yeah. So they need some way to get it to them to sign. And this is solving a problem that advocates particularly have, where they can't work with someone to do something like this easily.
Is there a way to fast track, or just, rather than like maybe we just shorten the testing, or is that basically what you're saying?
We haven't successfully done that so far. We've had no test that's taken less than 3 weeks, I think. So that's the question.
Okay.
Well, I think that's
not sure.
That kind of hurts a little, because we're developing the testing process. So the only testing that we've done really has been on the TRO, because we haven't been able to test the 209A, and that was in a big part due to the development process of the testing. So. The TRO took a little longer than, and the 209A, like they're our first forms are taking longer than they.
So also blame associated. Also, there hasn't. The fact is how long it's taken. So
and there hasn't been a fixed deadline for either of those either.
Yeah.
So so obviously it's like gas; it expands to fill the space.
Right.
Let me ask you this, Quentin. Like, is it going directly from like leaving the developer's hands straight to the user, or is there some level of like test, like even just developer testing that's happening?
I mean, as developers develop, they try it out. But
right, we can.
So
the form is really just like literally. Yeah. You put in the things and it puts it in the form. There's no branching.
Okay.
There's not a lot to test.
So it's like real minimal risk. It's real minimal risk.
So this is really just, it's a pre-written motion that has a caption and a signature block. That's pretty much what it is.
So we wanted to bring this to the group because we wanted to basically say, what is the process we would like to have in order to meet these goals of being able to get it out the door as soon as possible, where as soon as possible means like within a day or so. Is there a limit? So does that mean we have a parallel? So there are a lot of different options here. one, we could say within the confines of a private beta to advocates, okay, which is effectively what we've done with the 209A. And I think I like that as a start. And then two, within that, knowing that the beta is itself part of the testing process, then what process has to precede that, if any? And then what does it look like going parallel to that before we would then be ready to release in a non-private beta?
I mean, if Jody has some experience with this more than I have, then I would love to hear that. Well, I have thoughts, but
it's just all about mitigating risk. Like I understand, you know, I don't think if there's advantages to overriding like a process, and if the process is more cumbersome than the need, then I think it makes perfect sense to do what you guys are saying that you want to do. If the risk is really minimal and we're making, one of the things that I always try to do just as a, you know, process is anytime I'm wanting to make a decision, like just like what we're doing right now, I'm always trying to think about what are the assumptions I'm making? What am I assuming in making this decision? And if there's a way for you to test those assumptions, even if it's just like a 5-minute thinking it through your head or whatever, if there's a way to test those assumptions, like, so it sounds like to me, the assumptions we're making are there's super minimal risk. There's hard, like it's not going to blow up. It's people are not. And I think Michelle, you brought up a really good point about reputation. Like we don't want to lower people's confidence in us by putting something out there that's going to blow up on them. Right. So if that risk is minimal, we're not worried about the reputation so much because again, the risk is so small. I think it makes sense. And I like also the idea of putting kind of a disclaimer, like this is a pilot beta. So it's almost like you're setting the expectation that there could be problems, but don't worry, we'll respond quickly. Like that's the other thing too, like put it out there that this is a test, but if you have a problem, you know, here's a way to get help, and then let people get help. Make sure that we respond very quickly to that, because that also helps with the reputation and the confidence that, you know, if there is a problem, we'll fix it really fast.
Though I think with the anonymity we have with the feedback forms right now, we won't know who they are, so we won't be able to get back to them unless they contact us through other channels, just FYI.
So that's an idea then. If it's something like this where we're not following the normal process that would, you know, give us more confidence, if we're not following, that might be an idea then, that we want people to be able to get help ASAP. So
yeah.
I think we should also consider whether we're not just saying this is an exception to the process, but whether there's a different process we can use for different categories of this form that is a process, not that it's a non-process.
I like that.
That makes sense. Yep.
Because I think something like this is that I don't even think releasing it to advocates is going to be good for beta testing, because some advocates are saying they're not even seeing these situations, and we're saying this is a perfect example where people have a problem, they don't identify it as a legal problem, they don't know what to do. Right. And so I think what we could do in something like this is a thought, I'm not pushing it, but if we could get 4 housing advocates to just go through it, and I mean that kind of testing, I mean, and the testing is, does a name go in, does a signature go in, that kind of thing, for particular forms like this as a different process, and they're okay with it. Advocates may never use this, but people will, because people don't like to write letters and things like that. So it gives people a sense of what to do.
I was thinking of similar to Caroline, is if we can maybe just try and send some volunteers and try and break it. I think, you know, they just try and see what's wrong. You know, taking it very informal and maybe spending an hour on that. Because of the simplicity of what you've described, I haven't seen it yet, really. I would be happy to do that, to just run through it and informally test it. And then, as Jody said, have something that's in place with this kind of process where people are able to contact us if something goes wrong, and we will get back to them, or someone. I don't know who's gonna.
I think that this different process idea is great. So you could categorize some forms and interviews as no branching, and what was the other thing? Oh, certain elements, like the whole court thing, the court selection. That can be, I mean, once you've got it, it's working all the time, but that would be something that you would want to test, right? Especially with the BMC. But I'm thinking, if you could think about certain elements that go into a project or a form, that would determine the path it would take. So you always do a little bit of testing. You just decide what kind of testing it's going to get.
So we have a second class. The other thing that's different about this form is this is not a form the court has explicitly asked for. So it's probably only going to be something that people download and use on their own, because the court's not necessarily going to take it. They may at some point in the future if they decide they want to.
It's a motion, right? So
when I say take it,
won't take, yeah.
They only
won't take it digitally. Won't take it digitally.
Directly from us.
Through us. Yeah, they won't say it's an approved court form right now.
Is that,
which they might if we request it, but
is that the contract with them, that they're only going to
MOU? They have a list of forms that they will accept from us. It is not on that list.
Right.
It is not one we can email them.
Gotcha.
There's nothing in the MOU that precludes us from generating forms, however, that people can download and then file through another means.
And they can email themselves, right? I mean,
exactly.
Well, except the court hasn't actually said you can file by emailing, except for the housing court.
Probate you can for emergency.
I think you can for probate and family court. That's how you
file. They made an official statement.
I think so.
It's on the standing orders.
I think I could find it. Probably. There's like so many orders.
How people are filing now.
For emergent, I think it's just for emergencies in probate court, and non-emergencies are mail.
I think they've changed that, because I said something to Katie about it the other day, and she said,
you can send me whatever you have. The MOU, however, specifies that they will only accept from us those by electronic means, those things they have identified and approved.
So if a user went through the mass access interview and they put in the court, rather than select, well, I mean, you guys have a way you can email it to anybody. If they look up the email, I mean, see, then it's coming from you. I mean, do they have to download it and then
they will have to download it and email it.
Gotcha.
Is this a separate conversation, maybe to this?
This has moved into a separate conversation.
Yeah.
I think it is. I mean, it's relevant.
It is relevant. It's very relevant.
Is about the risk category, I think, which we didn't explicitly.
Okay, got it.
Which is that this is not a form that we are saying we're submitting directly on behalf of somebody to the court. So that is another category of risk that we're reducing. We're not taking ownership over delivery of it.
Okay.
So if there are errors, there's something that the person who downloads it would be able to see before it was submitted in a more explicit way.
Yeah. Would they? Thanks, Kate. Would they necessarily know that it's in there, though? I mean, I think. Can you drop us a link in the Slack, and can we run through it before we make a final call? Or
there is a link in the Slack.
There is, We could I don't know if it's a good use of time, but I could do it live. It's like 5 screens.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Should we do that? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. Let's figure out let's do that, but let's also talk about what we think the process is for a MVP tire kicking for our category 2 forms, or whatever we call this category.
And I can start that off by saying I think it definitely shouldn't be we just put it up without anyone seeing it.
I love that.
I think maybe we don't write specific unit tests for it. I think that's the level, or maybe we can figure out what that is that's different. But I think at least at the minimum is it should be run through by a few people in an informal testing.
And it doesn't need unit tests for like
the exact order of questions.
Before the release is what I'm saying.
Well, and the other thing that we could do in the
we don't have exact order of questions right now in the testing.
Okay.
Just FYI.
I just got a bunch of bug reports like that before, but not recently, so that's why I brought that up.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jody, you were going to say something? People still report it, and we still tell them that it's not a problem.
You know, like again, I think one of the driving factors in, you know, as we've talked now, wanting to come up with this like second classification of process is priority. So, you know, do we have a way to sort of like red flag this if we're posting it on the Slack channel and saying, hey, I need somebody to run through this? Is there a way to flag it and make it like, this is the highest #1 priority right now? Like drop what you're doing.
You can do @channel. You can do a message with @channel in the testing channel and in the general channel, and maybe in the code channel.
And maybe we can put a little icon next to it as well.
Sure. We'll pick an icon. Are you filling this in for someone else? Okay. There just isn't a follow-up right there. Okay.
So I'm just going to sign up computer.
There isn't a name for the person that you're filling it in for?
Sorry? That wasn't a question that was asked.
I thought it asked, are you filling this in for someone else?
He said for himself, I think, right?
Yeah. You said there wasn't a question about who you're filling it out for?
No.
Okay.
There was a question about whether you're ready to serve it on the other party. That might be what you saw.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
download and email it to yourself. You need to deliver it. You'll probably have the phone. You filed an answer
this is
yet.
the form. And this is what gets filled in, this area here, basically the case caption. This is all predefined boilerplate that doesn't ever get changed. And then you have also a signature and potentially a certificate of service.
We probably,
we can say like in this tier 2 process or whatever we're calling it, that either some number of SMEs of the correct, category take a look at it and kick its tires, and then it goes out. Like, is that and I mean, whoever is able to test it on emergency, but I think it does. One of the important factors is having SMEs test because they know if correct fields are being filled. And that's one of the main things with something like this that is this simple, right? Am I getting that right?
Michelle, when you say SME, are you talking like legal, like from the legal perspective SME, or like technical? Okay.
From the legal perspective. Okay. Because really we're looking at input and output, and we just have to make sure that the output's going to the right place.
Perfect.
Yeah. One thing I realized that I forgot about is that we don't talk about what service is. So we probably need to link to service from that.
Yeah, I think we were thinking this was going to be more for advocates, but it's helpful to know that advocates aren't really encountering these situations.
So that's what I've heard. That's what Andrea Park told us the other day. So that's why we need to make it a little bit more public friendly.
But we could put out a version for SMEs and work on the public version if that is, if it's a tier 2, tier whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think 5 is a good number of people.
I think 5 is a little much.
You think
I'm not sure
much?
we're going to find 5 people in that amount of time.
Yeah.
Well,
you got Quentin today. And Mariah.
I think we're not
right there.
It wouldn't be the coder. It wouldn't include the coder. Like, we can say it does include the coder, but that's not as reliable.
Yeah, well, actually, the thing is, if the coder happens to be a housing attorney, I think we can. That's what I'm saying.
But the coder has gone through. It's like editing your own language, or editing your own.
What if we do this? Yeah. What if we say this? What if the coder finishes it, they do their quick testing, then it goes through a technical, like an actual technical test, because we don't want to waste the legal SME's time if there's something functionally, technically that needs to get fixed, right?
Yeah.
So how about it just needs to do, again, like the coder does their development testing, then there's like a quick acceptance testing that we can come up with for like on the technical piece. And then once it passes all the technical, like everything, basically it's functioning as developed from a technical standpoint, then it goes to like, 1 or 2 SMEs. I think at that stage, 5 is probably too much also for what we're talking about here, but maybe that's the process.
Yeah. Do you feel like SMEs should be earlier? I just think the SMEs, a lot of what they're saying might require really significant changes. So I feel like there might be a lot of wasted time testing with the technical stuff.
And I mean, here's another, construct is that this form, as simple as it is, was written by SMEs. So this was written by housing attorneys to begin with. We haven't changed anything in the form except for where people go. So that might be, I don't know whether it be a tier 3 or it would be it's not
be a different process. Yeah.
And a lot of the forms, like a lot of the legal tactics forms forms and letters that I hope we'll be doing are written by housing attorneys, and they are scrutinized. I mean, it takes years to write these things. So people have agreed on them. It's different, Kate, from what you're talking about, like the motion. But I think if you're taking something that's right out of legal tactics or something that's right out of the Housing Coalition, word for word,
that's been heavily vetted. Yeah.
Already. I mean, you're not changing anything legal in it.
Let's assume that we have a class of forms that we are happy that they have been vetted to the point where they have a low risk associated with them, and they don't have any branching logic that's going to blow things up.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of having some process, but I want it to be a very light touch.
Yeah.
So Jody's bit about doing a functional testing or something like that, I think that could be okay as long as the edifice around it was simply, here, just take this and make sure you put stuff in and you get it out.
It doesn't break.
There doesn't need to write unit tests for scenarios or
exactly.
So just like can you kick this tires in later this afternoon, we're going to shoot it to 2 SMEs.
Yeah.
And then
I'm thinking like
boom,
everything
boom.
that I just said, I'm thinking could happen in like within a day.
Okay.
It's a quick, efficient.
I think that's an appropriate.
Yeah.
And do you think the students or interns or volunteers would be good people to just run, if they're not involved in it, just have.
So what I was going to say was, if we have people who have hours that they are expected to dedicate to this, that will be more reliable than counting on the volunteers who have other jobs and may not, maybe no one will be available that day, right?
Yeah, and so this means the students that we have on the, such as Jody, who is actually receiving credits, that would be a good way to test them. It also might be a good way to ease them in to testing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Things to look for.
Yeah. Part of the reason we're developing a more rigorous process for the testers is because the testers themselves have been uncomfortable with generally just kicking the tires. Mm-hmm. So it's not because we said no, you have to do it this way. It's because people don't like to go through it that way. But I think they would be willing to at times, if we express to them this is a different process. I think they would be willing to just kick the tires. I just think they don't like being expected to do that on a regular basis.
And
especially the complex form.
Yeah, exactly.
On a complex
that are
form,
complex.
right?
Yeah, I think that's really big.
Guys, I realize that we're half an hour over a lot of time, and I actually do have to jump off in 3 minutes.
Wasn't as small as a thing as we thought, which is fair.
Yeah. So I think Quentin and I would like to figure out how to get this form out by tomorrow.
Okay.
Because the nice thing is, since this is not this is the other key point here. Since this form is going to advocates, because we would be doing, we would be doing this, I think, in the private beta scheme as well. So we would just give it sort of porous private beta. We're going to give it to advocates, and then Caroline, before you link, maybe we can, in another version, we can get it more comfortable.
Sure.
What do you think is the time? What would be like if we had that next week, Caroline? Would that kind of depends on how because I can reach out to housing advocates. I mean,
sure.
I'm on different listservs.
Right. I mean, we had 5 housing advocates respond when Mariah sent something out to the Housing Coalition. So we even have people that we could identify to check it,
Okay.
So I think that would be good. I do think that we ought to do something about service before we put it to the public.
Before we make it to the public. That makes sense. Okay. Do you have any thoughts on that, or should I just try to do something? Should we check in?
We have a ton of, we have stuff on legal tactics about service. So I think we just link to,
that sounds good.
Put a sentence in there. Yeah. And you can just put whatever you want in, Quentin. I think you could, yeah.
And basically just to give you an idea of where my head's at is I like the idea of us getting another thing out that people can be using to get help, even while we're waiting for this MOU.
Absolutely.
Being recorded. Even as we're waiting for this process to complete itself, we can be helping people in a safe way by giving it to advocates. And
so it sounds like
if you can tell us a timeline for what
I'd like to get something out
today.
Tomorrow. You said tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So let me complete the first round of testing.
Quentin, does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, of course, part of this is driven by Caroline coming and saying, this is a form we need to get out. And I think you would have probably just put it up on the Mass Legal Help website if Mariah had done it already, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing to think about.
Mariah was ready to do it yesterday. She's like, let's finish this and get it out.
I sent out plenty of things to advocates to do just when I finish them.
Yeah. Sorry, Jody.
So just to kind of go through and summarize what needs to happen between now and tomorrow, it sounds like Caroline and Quentin, you guys are going to get together and figure out the service thing that needs to get added. And then Quentin, if you want to put the link or whatever, when you guys are done, I'm happy. I have time this afternoon. I can run through and test it between Maeve and I. We could run through and just do some really kicking the tires, just, you know, some quick testing, like half an hour, I don't know, less than an hour for sure. And then do we have any legal SMEs, like 1 or 2 legal SMEs, like lined up that can take, you know, like plan on like by 2 o'clock or so, 3 o'clock this afternoon that could look.
I don't think we can. No, well, we can't ask them to do it today. But
2 this afternoon? You're saying like to get them together with a technical person? Is that the reason for doing it that way?
Well, no, I'm just saying like, so what would happen is Maeve and I kick the tires on it. Once we say all is good, or we go back to you, Quentin, and say this isn't working or whatever, once that's done, then the next step would be to hand it over to those legal SMEs and have them just test it and make sure that it looks good to them. So we just need to have those actual people that are lined up to do that.
Yeah.
But not by 2, right? That's not what you meant. You must have said the wrong time.
So there's one other thing that we need to add besides the service, and that is if it can't I'm a little confused. If it can't come from Mass Access, we have to write something about downloading and emailing.
So this just brings me back to the point where originally, this is why I think it was good we were thinking about going just to advocates, because it doesn't have these layers of complexity.
Well, it's still, even if it's just going to advocates, you still have to tell advocates they have to download it and email it, right?
Yeah, well, it says that much. It doesn't tell them. It doesn't tell them
on the intro page.
It doesn't tell them.
On the intro page,
they have to know how they're filing.
Yeah.
And on the download page. And what we have here is to call the clerk, because that's what I think we thought was the correct instruction. But if the answer is you can actually just literally email it to this address, we can tell people go to this website and get the address. And as long as we're not doing it, maybe we're okay.
I do have to jump off. Can you just drop me a link and a time as to when I have to have that testing done, and then Jody and I will individually test it and try and break it individually.
Right.
And if there's any issues, then we'll report those. But if not, I mean, hopefully there's not going to be, but we'll try our best to find them. Just drop me the link and then also a time where you want this to be tested by.
So okay, I'll do that, and you can drop off. Maybe I think just if anyone hasn't on, we'll probably. When we say tomorrow, we mean the end of the day tomorrow is my guess.
Oh, okay.
That is what we mean.
That means we'll have
as
much time as you need for me to then have like 5 hours to do fixes.
Okay, so is there anyone that can line up and reach out to the 1 or 2 legal SMEs that can then, once we finish, you know, the first 2 steps, then that 3rd step can, like, we'll have them lined up so that they know that that's something we want them to do tomorrow, or we can give them like an estimated time. The reason I say that is because if we wait until the reason I say that is because if we wait until we're done with everything we just talked about, like you finishing and then me and Maeve testing and then any back and forth that needs to happen, if we wait until then, like we might then be waiting on other people. So now it's like, let's get them already lined up in the pipeline to be able to take this tomorrow.
Right. Mariah doesn't work on Wednesdays, but I think Andrea does. I can ask Andrea, and then I'm meeting with Mariah at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, so I can ask her who the 2 advocates are or whoever it was on the Housing Coalition. Quentin, I don't know if the Housing Coalition responded or somebody responded directly to Mariah. So I can look at the Housing Coalition and see, and I can also get in touch with Mariah. So we can try to line up.
I did something silly, which is take myself off that mailing list. So I'll add myself back in. But I can email it to like 5 or 6 people that I think could.
Are you good? All right. Well, do you want to just do that, or do you want me to do the Mariah thing with the people who already?
If she's already engaged with people, I think that sounds great. As long as
it sounds like from a timing perspective,
she won't be able to do today. Or...
It sounds like from a timing perspective, what we can plan on is let's see how long it takes me and Maeve to do this. And then if we find any issues and go back to you, Quentin. And then based on that, like say we're finished with everything by like 3 o'clock this afternoon, maybe it's better for Quentin, you go ahead and send out everything out to your people. And then we might get a response tonight before 10 a.m. tomorrow. But at the worst case scenario, if we can get our piece done, at least if it's done by 10 a.m. tomorrow, then Caroline, you've got a person that you're talking to at 10 that could potentially get us people to help with.
Mm-hmm.
Does that work?
The only stopper I see is that Quentin and I have a call at 2.
Oh,
that's true.
Okay.
But I can send something out, what we've talked about so far before then. And then I think the service, it sounds like there may be a page on Mass Legal Help me to link to, and I'll just write something so it explains
right, but we
what
don't need
service
to do
is.
service in time to get it to the advocates, right? We'll just need to do service by Monday.
So maybe we just shouldn't do that because we don't want to have them say something that changes in the middle of the day. We'll just we'll put a pin in that part.
So the idea of something going out tomorrow is something that's just going to go to advocates.
Right.
Let's just be very explicit
and it's just
about
this
that.
exact thing that we have. There's not going to be any changes before that happens,
Okay.
unless they're bugs that
ready to go.
are technical changes.
Quentin,
we are really thinking MVP here.
And Quentin, you're like, sorry.
No, go ahead, Kate.
I was gonna say you're obviously like way more connected to housing stuff, but I was actually just talking to a friend of mine at VLP earlier today, and she said they're starting virtual clinics up again, so they might be really good to get it too. Virtual housing clinics.
Yeah.
And I think that's Amy. I don't know if you know Amy Anthony, but she kind of runs their housing unit now.
Oh,
I was talking to Sarah Lee, but Sarah said Amy's kind of would be the one to talk to.
Right. Yeah. I bet Amy's the other person who's on this remote court hearing.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, because it's out for housing court. So yeah.
So it sounds like that's good. Then it's good to go as is, right? You guys don't need to add anything right now.
If we're focusing on advocates, I don't think so.
We're just focusing on advocates.
Yeah. So go ahead and post the link so that Maeve and I can test it, and we'll start, like I can start that right now.
And actually, Quentin, we can take something off your plate is Mariah Mariah knows DocAssemble, so she could add something to the service stuff tomorrow.
That would be great. If Mariah
on the development server.
That's a good idea.
Yes, not on the production.
Yes, she doesn't
even know how to get on the production server.
Okay. I think only Quentin and I have access to production, right?
Yeah.
Great. Good. I want to understand, is this going to be the regular feedback link for advocates and beta testers, or is this going to be the user feedback link? Because I need to tighten up some stuff there if that's the case.
So this is on the production server right now, but it's in its own package. And I think it goes to the separate form for regular users because it's on the production server.
Okay.
Can you tell me what I would see? Would I just see 3 radio buttons versus 4? Is that the difference on the first? Or do you not know?
If you're not signed in, then you wouldn't be stopped. It's the same one you created. I just have to hook
it. Oh, yeah. So there's no thing that tells me I have to log in or that it's captured my email. So yes, this is the one that's made for the general public.
Okay. So I'll get on that as well. And just make sure that I need to send a couple test runs and make sure that it's actually hooked up properly. Just didn't want to add noise before.
Yeah, and we could ask the people to send us emails instead if you're not sure about that yet.
Yeah, it's a nice thing. We are still.
Well, that's also
that's probably what a lot of people will do, no matter, even if we didn't ask. If we asked them to use the test run, they'll still send us emails.
That's what happened. We put it this whole forum, and everybody's emailing us.
And just to be aware that it would be anonymous. We wouldn't know who they are if they go through the form. So, it depends on
and does the form explicitly make clear that we do not have a way of contacting them back, that it's anonymous?
I believe so. I can make sure. I think I edited the other one.
You did that consciously because you don't want people emailing with legal problems. Is that right?
No,
that's right.
I did that. Well, I did that
that's one reason
consciously
why
because we want to keep it private, right? We want to keep for actual pro se users who will be the other group of users using this form. We don't want to require a name because it should be private, right?
No, I realize that, but lots of people, if you allow them to put that stuff in, they will put it in because they're hoping to get more help. Yes. And that's what I was thinking, well, why don't we allow them to do it? And then I think, David, the point is that we don't want to be in a position where people have any any inkling that we might be.
Yeah, we didn't want that we wanted to make it clear that feedback contact thing was for feedback contact about the operation of the form, not for like my particular problem.
Not like for the 10,000 things I'm sending to Margaret that are feedback.
Yeah. If you want, we can,
like, I had
if you
an
can think
email
of,
for
if you
Made,
can,
and 200 users a month and like once a week I would get an email, and I was fine. And mostly they were like, how can I get a lawyer? That was most of the emails, but I didn't mind it because it was not super high volume. So,
and if we want to look at the language at the bottom of the page that says, send us feedback, to make sure that it doesn't imply anything else and that it's clear about the fact that we won't be getting back to them, I think that's perfectly good as well.
Yeah, it just has 3 things now that we're expected to collect. It says feedback, suggestions, or comments, ? So I think it's pretty clear that.
Yeah, ours is really clear. Don't give us any personal information. Social security numbers.
Yeah.
So it may be worth expanding something on when you actually click through and they get to the survey, just making clear the framing that this is just for.
I don't think, if people are desperate, they'll put out their problems. That's what they do.
Yes, but if they know that it's not actually going to be linked up with them, or because the point is we can't staff to support.
I know, I realize.
Also, what we should say is that this information is going to be made public because it is not on a private repository. This is a public repository, and so are the issues.
Nothing is going to stop certain people. Point. That's all there is to it. I do think that maybe what might be helpful to people is, people they will tell everybody because they're so desperate. But I do think what might be helpful is to direct them to either the Legal Resource Finder or Mass Legal Answers, or tell them where they can go if they have a legal problem and we can't help them, even though it's in the interview.
So if you can give me that language and those links, I can implement that.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So Caroline, if you could do a blurb and say.
Yeah.
I can put it in that just to save you from having to write something. I think it's literally you just want a link to Legal Resource Finder, I think, right?
And Mass Legal Answers online. I think that's the other thing, because then you have, then you can go right and talk to a lawyer if your income's low enough. I might have that on my
I think that whole thing is perfect. Like, this is only for feedback on the form. Like Michelle said, anything you share on this will be made public. If you need further help with your, personal problems, but like obviously we won't say that, but then click here and go to there. I think that's perfect.
I think we can't put all that at the bottom of the page, but we can put
no, that would be when you click through
in the form.
Yeah.
Well, Quentin was saying he would put it.
I don't think we should change that right now. I don't think that should be something we try to do by tomorrow, but we could change the form.
Okay, because I thought you were saying you would add something to the interview, and I was like, I don't think that's going to be practical. Okay.
All right, Quentin and I have another thing we need to jump onto, and we need to chat a little bit before that.
Okay.
So does everyone have
action points?
Yeah.
We have our marching orders, I think.
Do I want to reshare that link? I'll do that. I'll reshare the link to the interview. I'm going to reshare the link to the interview.
So that's ready to go right now, right?
Oh, to the interview.
It is, because I think we're not making changes.
Perfect.
To the service or other parts.
Okay.
So
we're on it.
We're just getting good enough to share with everyone.
You're putting it, Quentin, you're putting it on the assembly line channel? That's where you're putting the link?
Yeah, I think that's the right place, right?
Yeah.
Bye.
And I'm not going to ask people to apply. I'm just going to put it on there, right? Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I'm going to stop the recording. Bye.